The boulder field is hard to imagine if you haven't been there. It is literally a field full of boulders, and that field is probably half a mile by a mile, just covered absolutely in boulders from the size of volleyballs up to the size of your refrigerator. Just boulders. There's really not much soil there even to be seen. And you've got to hop from boulder to boulder as you work your way up towards the Keyhole. It might be easy to get lost there in a storm, but you can generally follow the trail in good weather, and when you're going up Longs Peak, you just keep aiming for the Keyhole. So that's how you kind of stay on track. But when you jump from boulder to boulder, sometimes you do have to take a little bit of a leap, and sometimes the boulders are loose, and you'll hear them rattle beneath your feet, clunk, 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 as you step on and off the boulder. And you just slowly pick your way through those boulders towards the Keyhole. So slow and steady, watch your footing. Don't slip and go between two boulders, you're going to hurt your leg. When you're going through the boulder field, you're at about 12,000 feet. You're 6 miles in. So by now you should have had several water breaks and food breaks. If you haven't, stop and have another one. And it's kind of a long stretch. You go through the boulder field for 40 minutes or something like that. You can see the diamonds sticking up. Longs Peak is starting to look a little scary at this point. But you've still got a ways to go, so you just keep plowing ahead. Don't worry too much about the upper mountain yet. You've got a few more hurdles to get over. So just focus on where you're at in the boulder field. Careful footing. You'll eventually get to the Keyhole, and then we'll get on to the next challenge in the chain. As you get close to the Keyhole, you have to use your hands a little bit to scramble from rock to rock. There's a pretty good little trail there. You can see where other people have gone. And you're kind of scrambling, you can't see much, and all of a sudden your head pokes above the Keyhole, and you get this incredible view of the western part of the park going on for 50 miles in all directions to the west and northwest and southwest. Incredible view. Sometimes when you go through there, the wind gets funneled down as it goes through the Keyhole, so the wind speed can be really intense right through the Keyhole itself. Sometimes it's better to stay on one side of the ridge or the other so you're not beat up by the wind while you're enjoying the view. You go through the Keyhole, you're on the back side of Longs now, on the west side. You've only got a mile and a half to go, but it is going to be a slow mile and a half, because in places you have to use your hands a little bit as you scramble around a little boulder or across a small ledge. You don't need ropes, but you do need good awareness of where you're going. There are large bullseyes, red and yellow bullseyes back there, and when in doubt, look for the next bullseye. As you approach the Narrows, you've just come out of the top of the trough. You did a short little 10 or 15 foot climb, and whew, wow, that was a little struggle to get here. And now you're in a nice little flat spot looking straight across the west side of Longs Peak, and it's called the Narrows. And the Narrows, you can see different estimates of length, but let's say it's 150 feet in length. And it is the narrowest spot. In some places, the trail gets down to about 1 foot wide. In some places, it's 2 or 3 feet wide. Again, you don't need ropes as long as the rock is dry. If it's wet or icy or has a very thin layer of ice on it, we call verglass, which is like thin glass-like ice that's 1 millimeter thick, don't go across it because it's slippery. But assuming it's dry and clear, you don't need ropes to go across here. But off to your right, to the further west, you can fall 80, 100 feet down that way. And people have fallen down there. So as a result, the best thing to do is to follow the climber's rule of 3 points of contact. You've got 2 hands, you've got 2 feet, you have 4 points. If you keep 3 of them in contact with the rock at all times, your chances of falling are very, very, very small. So just move 1 hand and foot at a time. Now, if you're a comfortable climber and you want to move a little more briskly and move continuously, that's up to you. But a first-timer should probably move one hand or 1 foot at a time, always keeping 3 points of contact, and that means your chances of falling are near zero. The summit of Long's Peak is roughly the size of a football field, maybe somewhat smaller. It is pretty flat, and there's boulders all over the place. The actual true summit is you kind of go towards the east or northeast side of that plateau, and there'll be a collection of high boulders. It'll look like the highest spot, and if you scramble around, you'll find, as usual on a Colorado summit, it's a little bronze plaque, round one about the size of a big cookie, and then it'll have the summit marker there. And there's usually a summit log nearby and a little plastic cylinder. You can unscrew the cylinder, pull out the pen, and write your name on the paper log of what your name is and when you summited the peak. People generally do that when they first get to the summit. I'd also advise you to look around at the weather. Look in all directions and ask yourself if there's a storm coming. And if there is a storm coming and it looks like this black flat bottom cloud's coming at you, don't take your rest here. Tag the summit, turn around, and get back down. You take your rest a little bit lower because you do not want to be in the summit of any mountain, especially Long's Peak, when the lightning comes in. But assuming that the weather's looking good, now's the time to immediately put on some layers to stay warm, because now that you're not moving, you're going to get cool and the wind is stronger and your clothes are a little damp. So you're going to cool down very quickly. I would put 1 or 2 layers in my hat on for sure. Then you can stop and enjoy. Break out the water, the food, take some pictures, and enjoy the incredible view all over the place. I don't recommend you go very far east back towards your car there, because there is a huge drop-off straight down the diamond face, like 1,500 feet of overhanging and vertical rock. So you don't want to go right to the very edge, but most of us will have an instinct to stay back from that edge of the diamond. There's multiple nice peaks right in Rocky Mountain National that you mentioned, Pagoda and Meeker, and scores of 13,000 and 12,000 foot mountains right around you. You get a great view out east onto the plains. You can see, depending what time of day or night you hit it, you can see lights down in Denver and Boulder that glow. If that's not present anymore in the daytime, you can still kind of sense the urbanized downtown. I'm not sure you can really pick out individual buildings unless it was a super clear day. Probably not. And if you look to the south, you can see other 14ers. Long's Peak is the most northerly 14,000 footer in Colorado. So down to the south, you, depending on which direction you look and how far you can see Grays and Torreys, you can see Beardstadt and Evans, and you can see Pikes probably on a pretty clear day, which is 100 plus miles as the crow flies due south.